Welcome back to Under Oath. Today we have actor, director, and New York Times best-selling author Andrew McCarthy. Andrew, how are you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
I got to tell you, you made me a superhero today.
How so?
My daughter's favorite movie is Pretty in Pink, so, I
A lady of
appreciate
fine
that.
judgment. Yeah.
Yep. So I told her, I said, no, he's done a lot, And she goes, I just love that movie. I said, I got it. A lot of other
How
people
old
do
is
too.
she?
She's 20 now. She's in a theater program in Florida.
Okay. That's interesting. That movie, it's like generational because mothers then show it to their daughters and then the kids start looking at it and they're kind of like, this is ridiculous. And the hairdos and the silly clothes. And then by the end, they're kind of watching and they go, you know what? That's exactly what it feels like. It's the emotions. That's what John Hughes captured so well as he honored sort of young people and their emotions.
I think about all that stuff, but I really love it. I did some research. I actually ordered your book, but it doesn't come in for a couple days. And I ordered it from your website. I didn't order it from Amazon. So, I think that was a better way to do it. But
Thanks.
Traveling around, you've spent a lot of time traveling since, you're performing, you're going all over the world. I mean, a lot of people just stay comfortable with things. What got you on the road?
Oh, well, I became a travel writer about 20 years ago. I found travel sort of changed my life and my place in the world. And I began to write about it. And I started writing about it for magazines. And then that evolved eventually into books and whatnot. I find I'm not a big believer in travel for like Instagram things or bucket lists. I find I've always said the world is like, traveling's been the university of my life. You know what I mean? I learn about myself and my place in the world and my relationship to the world through traveling. And I just find it a really valuable use of time. And then I was lucky enough to sort of incorporate that into the work that I do.
Now, I know how the book you just started, you just finished that we're ordering is about male friendships and how your son actually inspired it by going, why don't you have any men friends?
Yeah, he was telling me, we were sitting at the kitchen table and he was telling me a funny story about one of his buds. And as we finished, we laughing, we settled down. He just looked over at me and said, well, you don't really have any friends, do you, Dad? And I took the hit and I said, no, Sammy, I do have friends. I just don't see them, but I know they're there and that's enough. And he looked at me and went, yeah, okay. And he went off to see his girlfriend. And I sat with that for a couple of days. I didn't forget it. And I thought, it's not enough. I need to go see my friends. I like a lot of guys had when I was young and first out in the world, I had this sort of core group of friends that were like my chosen family, and through life they evolved, they moved off, they got married, they had jobs, they scattered around the country. And I realized I hadn't seen a lot of them in years and years, some in decades. And I thought I need to go see these guys. So, and since I hate driving and driving on highways, I drove back roads across America, 10,000 miles to go see these folks. And along the way, I started randomly, casually talking to other men I'd approach these guys, at gas stations or in bars or restaurants. And I'd kind of say, hey, I'm on my way to see an old friend of mine and ask them about friends and friendship in their life. And they all looked at me like I was nuts. But invariably, they all kind of opened up and talked to me about friendship and the place it had in their lives. And most of them concluded the conversation by going, I've never talked about this before. And, I've never think about my friends. And guys particularly, women are much better at it, I think, but guys particularly, we've gotten very isolated in many of us, and this idea of manhood has become this kind of macho, for a long time now, since idea of the stoic, alone, pull your hat down, carry your own water, and that leads to a lot of isolation, and I just don't think that's in our best interest. And so anyway, I went across the country to reconnect with these people, and it was a really profound experience for me. And I got somewhere in the middle of Kentucky, I thought, I wonder if there's a book in this. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
And because a theme started to emerge of sort of this loneliness and separation that a lot of guys were experiencing. And so it was fascinating. And it was fascinating to rediscover America again in a way I never had before.
Friendships when it comes to celebrity is tough. I'm a pseudo celebrity because of the comic books and the shows and everything. And sometimes people are nicer to you because of who you are, not really who you are inside. And when you make that trip and you go meet these people again, did it matter that you were this celebrity? Or was it like, no, we're going back to, 40 years ago when we were in a bar together?
Well, I think it's pretty quick, as you probably know, once you have any bit of notoriety, you can tell pretty quickly what people are after and who's genuine, who's just sort of there for that, whatever they think they're going to get from you or something. I don't know. That sort of is not really that big a factor in my life. People always wonder about that. It's just not a factor. And all these friends, particularly, were people I'd met before I was successful in a public way in any way. So they were all just sort of authentic, true friends of mine. But I have found in life, certainly there are many people you meet, and being successful in a public way has opened a lot of doors for me that I would never have had open. So it's been, I'd say the pluses have been more than the minuses. But certainly you can tell, I think, very quickly when somebody's sort of, flustered by whatever, and that doesn't last very long.
I wound up cutting loose a lot of friends because we just weren't the same anymore. It wasn't that I didn't like them anymore. It's just we didn't have anything in common. I was in a relationship, I was married for 25 years and they're still out going to bars and meeting women. And I thought that was where I lost a lot of my friends.
Well, I think there's the other side of that coin is there are friends you have where and then I've met a lot of people that said this. It was like it was yesterday. You just pick right up where you left off. You know what I mean? And those are those true, deep, real friends. There's just some sort of soul connection that you have with certain people. Some people, yes, you gravitate and grow apart. But I was, on this trip, these were guys that I had just sort of had a deep connection with. And for me, if I did one thing right on this trip, it was that I showed up. That cliche of 90% of life is showing up. I think it's really true that I sort of made the effort and drove to see these people and knock on their door and say, hey, you know what, dude, you're valuable in my life. You're important in my life. You've meant a lot to me and I just need to come see you. Making oneself sort of vulnerable, if that is making yourself vulnerable, it was invariably sort of received by them. And it made our relationships deeper and richer, And so I found sort of the opposite of that. I found it really enhancing to my relationships. And those other ones that sort of have that, but, there are moments in time where our cross paths with people and then we diverge again. That's just life, But those few deep core relationships, I think those can be eternal.
It was very strange because I have certain relationships, but I went out with this guy the other day and we went to a basketball game, saw the NBA game. And him and I were like, I didn't know the guy very well, but we were like the same brain and all night back and forth. And I realized I missed that in my life. I miss those moments, those male bonding moments. And I don't know whether it's frowned upon in today's society, but I missed it.
Well, I think you touched on something really important there. When you find those things too, when we get older, we don't tend to follow through on those things. You ought to go to another game with that guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think I say in the book, there's a statistic. It takes 200 hours to make a real close friend. That's what these social scientists have found. And, when you find somebody that you have that spark with, it's worth, and as we get older, it's a vulnerable making act to kind of go, let's do that again, man. Let's go play golf or whatever. And guys I think are better at sort of parallel play, like toddlers. We're like toddlers, we're better at action and in doing things. Whereas my wife will just go meet somebody they like and go, let's have a cup of tea. And they'll go and they'll sit and they'll chat in the corner for an hour over a cup of tea. And, we're not going to do that. I mean, I'm not generally. And so going to a game with a guy or going to, I think it's a really valuable kind of thing. And I think it's worth pursuing when we encounter those. A couple of the people I talked to in the book that I go back and see are guys that I met a little later in life, in my 30s and 40s, and that I somehow managed to keep those connections up with. And I think it's really important and worth the effort.
Now,
because it's like at a certain point, like, what do you got to lose by saying, you want to go to another game? Yeah, I'd love to. Or no, I'm too busy. It's like, okay, they can't really hurt you. You know what I mean?
Now, I'm a little jealous of something. I read up on you last night. I saw that you did the Camino.
Oh, yeah, twice.
And, I'm like, where do I get 30 days? I know it's so important, but where do I get 30 days? And a lot of our listeners might not know it's a 500-mile walk or it's a 200-mile walk, whichever way you want to do it. But I can't even imagine doing that. It's such a dream.
Well, it's an amazing thing. I've done it twice now. The last one I did, I wrote a book about it called Walking with Sam, I walked with my 19-year-old son across Spain, which is an extraordinary experience. So again, it's sort of like this book in the sense that was a travel book about walking across Spain, the way this is a travel book about a journey across America. But that book was about father-son relationships, whereas this book's about friendship. But, to that I would just say, we don't have the time. It's impossible, but you make the time and you do it. Because when you look, that old cliche, when you're looking back, on your life, on your deathbed, am I going to go, oh my God, the Camino, when I walked and spent that month with my son, Is that going to be more important than the 2 extra interviews I did or the extra job that I took or whatever? I think we just sort of go, what's important in our lives? And I'm older than you, so I've gotten to this place where I go, that's why I went to see these guys again. I went, what's important in my life? These guys are important to me. I need to go see them. I'm going to just do that. And this road trip it's sort of improvisational. It didn't start out to do this. I didn't start out to drive 10,000 miles. I spent 6 weeks. I just went to see one, and then I saw one. I go, I'm going to go see Matthew in Kentucky. It's only, I'm halfway there. And so I drove to see him, and then I'm like, oh wait, you know what? I'm going to go to Texas. And then I just kept, and I called my wife, and she's like, oh, just go, And luckily I have someone to do that, who will allow that. So I just think it's what's important to us,
I think when you talk about this stuff, I mean, the one thing I've always said is you can't accomplish anything unless you have a really great partner. If your partner isn't supportive, if your partner isn't understanding, you don't get to do that stuff. And I mean that your wife said, yeah, just go do it. That's an unbelievable
Well, yes
gift.
and no. Yes and no, absolutely. I think that's absolutely true. But as someone much wiser than me said, choose wisely.
Okay.
So, But it's also then my wife gets to go and goes, okay, see ya. And she's off to Greece, or wherever she's going. But if we're a good partner, we know that our partner's sort of evolution and life is, if we want to have a better life, we need to make sure they're having, growing and moving too. It's so, I just think that's important. And I think travel is particularly solo travel, I think super important. I think solo travel really is life-changing and valuable, and people ought to do more of it. And they don't do it because they're afraid, frankly.
Now, when I was looking at everything you did, I was thinking to myself, I said, you know something? I could actually watch a show with him doing it, but then I thought to myself, I wonder why he doesn't do it. And I thought in my brain, it probably had something to do with it would take away from the experience.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I make my living doing all that kind of stuff, and I do this kind of stuff for me. It becomes, the minute something is filmed and on film, it becomes different. It becomes performative in a certain way. And I'm doing these things really because I'm genuinely interested. And I was interested in finding out and talking to these guys and going, what's the deal here? Because I'd neglected friendship in this instance for far too long. And I became interested. And I thought there were people out there to teach me stuff. And I had stuff to learn from it. The minute you stick a camera in somebody's face, that all changes, And shows are, most travel shows don't work, in my opinion. They're travelogues or they're just vanity productions for people. And I was, these were things that I'm actually interested in. So I sort of had a different agenda.
Now, you get to travel all over the country signing your books. Now, I bought yours online, just so you know, you can go to his own website and order the books there. You can order through Amazon. It's going to be on Kindle. It's going to be on everything. But I can't imagine the experience that your fans are going to have actually getting to meet you in a Barnes & Noble or something like that.
Yeah, I love going on book tours because, you sit in a room and you're sort of alone for a year writing this thing in a vacuum. And so going out and meeting, it's different than meeting people that love, Pretty in Pink or whatever, which I love too. I've really come to really appreciate those movies in a way I didn't when I was young and what they mean to people. But when, meeting readers out on the road, I love that. I love doing book appearances.
When I write, I normally know my ending. A lot of other writers, they go, we just write and then we eventually get to where we're going. Now, you've written a bunch of books. What is the process? Do you think of the math, the chapters, or you just keep going until you get there?
Each one is different. John Irving, the wonderful novelist, said he doesn't begin a novel till he knows the last sentence. And I thought that's when you can write to something, I think that's amazing because you can write with real confidence. But in this book, I didn't know where it was ending until I and then it happened. Once you get it, though, you're like, that's it. It's like it floats by and you just have to grab it.
You feel like a genius when you go, look at me. Look what I did here. Oh.
Well, that moment lasts about 2 minutes where you go, this is brilliant. And then, you reread it and you go, it's not that good.
Now, the hardest thing I have is when editors get to my stuff and they go, Jeff, I would take this out. And you're trying to explain to them how much you love it. And it's still gotta go.
I do believe in killing your darlings. I think when editors, I invariably, thank God editors give notes most of the time in email because my defensiveness and rage, I can just stomp around the house. I don't have to pretend to be, and then I just write back, got it, thank you. But I find notes, my relationship to them has changed over time. I used to be very, very defensive and get very frustrated with them. Now I realize if somebody raises a red flag, they're nearly always right. Their solution isn't always right, but the fact that they're raising a red flag about it, because their solution, they're not in your head. They don't know the 10 other things you might have written, but they know they've raised a flag about something. And I think that is always worth attending and looking at.
Yeah, I love that. Last question. I ask this for all the theater students and everybody else who listen to the show. Auditioning. What do you think the most important mindset you've ever had when you walk into an audition?
Every casting person wants you to be the solution. They want you to be the answer. You know, and so nobody's sitting there they want you to succeed. And I think that's the most important thing. And I think most of the time you get the job from when you walk in the door till you sit in the chair. You've gotten the job or lost the job. It's very rarely what you do. And when I'm directing and I watch tapes, because now people do self-tapes all the time, the first 10 seconds have to be the best. You can't go, oh, I really warm up by the end of the scene. Nobody's going to get to the end of the scene. Nobody. The first 10 seconds has to be happening, or they just go next. Sorry, but that's just the truth.
Well, I appreciate the advice, and I can't tell you how great it is to talk to you. And I hope you get better. I'm suffering too. So, I'll give you your life back, Andrew. Take care.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. Good to talk to you.
Bye-bye.